Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Diner Discussions, Entrepreneur Across America Diner Discussions. Today we have an EAA member, Mark Stone from Sales Tax Defense. Mark is a CPA, but the only tax return he prepares is his own. What Mark's whole firm focuses on is sales tax, and Sales Tax Defense LLC is the name of his firm. And he does sales tax defense across the entire country, not just New York. And hey, Mark, jump in, say hi, and tell us about sales tax defense and what is a sales tax CPA? How did you get started? And tell us about it.
Well, good morning, and thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you for being here.
Oh, my pleasure. I got started about 30 years ago, actually.
Okay.
I was hired right out of school by the New York State Department of Taxation and Finance to go be a sales tax auditor and go ask different New York State businesses for money.
Okay.
Worked for the state for a couple of years, decided working for the state wasn't exactly for me, left the state and went to work in public accounting.
Okay.
Along the way, got my CPA license, got a master's in tax. I taught undergraduate and graduate taxation at CW Post for a number of years.
Okay.
And about 15 years ago, I started my own practice doing strictly sales tax consulting.
Sales tax. Okay. So yeah, I've been told that my dad's a CPA, and he always says, if you're going to pay one tax, just one tax, you make sure it's sales tax. You know, that's the one you don't want to mess up on because those bills don't go away. They are hard to negotiate, and if there's ever a problem, you have to bring in an expert, and I guess you're the expert.
Yeah, and there's a lot of truth to that. And the reason for that is if you think about most businesses that are actually paying the tax over to the government, it's not their money that they're paying over to the government.
It's the government's money. It's the state's money.
But specifically, so we're having coffee today, and the diner is going to charge us, for the coffee, and they're going to charge us sales tax on the coffee when we check out. So they're going to collect our money, our sales tax, and it's now their job to turn our money over to the government. So they become a trustee or a fiduciary of that money. So generally what almost every state says, and New York certainly says this, that if you don't turn over that money, the business owes the money, the owners of the business owe that money that wasn't turned over. The state imposes tax, interest, and penalties on an assessment, and it's not dischargeable in bankruptcy even if the business goes out of business.
So even if the business goes out of business, okay, because part of that money, they held state's money.
Yep.
Okay, so.
It's always viewed, it's supposed to be a separate piggy bank.
Okay.
So since it's a separate piggy bank, it should never get spent. So that's why there's no forgiveness if you reach into someone else's piggy bank to spend someone else's money for your expenses.
Okay, and they put a lot of resources into collecting their money as well. I would imagine they hire guys like you who learn the system backwards and forwards, so they can follow through and say no, and how do they estimate a lot of times, or is it all done on estimation? They look at a place like the Dix Hills Diner and they say, well, you have X number of seats, you have X number of turnover of patrons. We estimate that you do X amount of dollars a month or a week, times by 52. You owe us, based on our calculations, this amount. Now it'd be up to somebody like you to argue against that and say, wait a second. You're overlooking all this. You're overlooking, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, which are very slow. You're using Saturday numbers for Tuesday.
Right. Well, there's lots of different methods, and like you said, I used to work for the government, and now, of course, I work for different businesses, making sure they don't get taken advantage of by the government. But what the underlying law says that if you keep your records, the government has to look at your records and determine your tax liability, if any, by your records. So we're here at the diner, they're going to give us a guest check at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Hopefully the guest checks are all sequentially numbered. So if they ever get audited, you just take all the guest checks, you put them in numerical order, add them up, and you say this is what they should have reported. You subtract from that what they did report. Hopefully that number comes out to be 0, and the government goes away. When you run into the problem that the place doesn't keep the right records, they didn't save the guest checks, there was a fire, there was a flood, whatever happens if they don't have the right records, then you're right, the government gets to estimate things, and you have to then show that estimation is just completely wrong.
Okay.
And it's a pretty high burden to actually show that the assessment is wrong if they're estimating it, because the law starts with the burden on the business to keep the records.
So the burden of proof is on the business, and keeping good records is the only real way to protect yourself. Gordon Clarkson, if you're listening, you've mentioned that before. Good record keeping is the way to go.
Yep.
All right, fantastic. What advice do you give to business owners, generally speaking, to evade tax trouble?
So, well, evade is a funny word, because evade is a criminal word,
All
actually.
right, no pun intended.
Yes. So the first thing is make sure you're filing a sales tax return. If you have a business and you're not filing at least one sales tax return a quarter, you're doing something wrong. Because
One sales tax return.
at least one.
At least one sales tax
A
return.
quarter.
A quarter. Okay.
So you're doing something wrong. And the reason for that is take an accountant.
Okay.
And most people would say accountants don't charge sales tax, so why would they file a sales tax return? Sales tax is two pieces. It's the piece that you get charged by the retailer for something. Accountants don't charge sales tax. But anyone who buys anything also has to pay sales tax. So accountants buy lots of green paper and lots of pencils and lots of calculators and lots of all sorts of things like that, computers and software. So the government has the right to come in and audit any business and make sure that that business paid the right sales tax, even if they're not charging sales tax, and that's called use tax. And by filing a return, you give the government a limited 3-year period to come knock on your door, whereas if you don't file a return, the government has an unlimited period of time. They can knock on your door 20 years later and say, where's my taxes? And you say, I don't have my records from 20 years ago.
So the government is just as interested in sales tax you've paid out as they are in sales tax you've collected?
Yes, and they just call that use tax.
Use
USE.
tax. Okay, because from not reporting a use tax, they can delve into a whole bunch of other areas, I guess, of how you're running your business, or are you accurately recording earnings and things of that nature.
Right, or just even not that you do anything wrong, but just take, for example, I represented a radiologist.
Okay.
Doctors don't charge sales tax. He bought a $3 million. I represented a radiologist, and he bought a $3 million MRI machine. And the way he actually bought it, he didn't write a check for it. He went to a Midwest leasing company, and they then charged him whatever it was, $20,000 a month for that machine. But since they were in the Midwest, they didn't have what's called Nexus, or at least the leasing company thought they didn't have Nexus with New York. And they didn't charge the doctor sales tax on this MRI machine. So the state came in and audited the doctor. They didn't even look at his revenue because there's no tax due on his revenue. And they looked at his expenses. He wasn't filing sales tax returns. They went back 6 years, and they said you're spending $20,000 a month times 6 years, so 72 months times $20,000, and then charged him, 8.5% sales tax on that. Plus, they waived the penalties because they said it wasn't intentional. But the minimum interest rate that New York State is allowed to charge on a delinquent sales tax assessment is 10.5%.
So
Going back to 6
so
years.
you got a hefty little fee there. Fine.
Yes, hundreds of thousands of dollars was his bill.
Wow, could have put him right out of business, I imagine.
Yep.
Or did put him out of business.
Well, it doesn't really put you out of business because it's not dischargeable if you go out of business. So let's say he owed $400,000.
he has to pay it.
He has to pay it. So if the business closes, he still owes it personally.
Do they work out a payment plan for the $400,000?
They do, but typically they only give you 3 or 4 years.
So he's got to come up with $100,000 a year,
Right.
and he can't. Even if he closes the business, he's still owing the $400,000.
Right.
Oh, so yeah, that's yeah.
And he's actually got to come up with more than $400,000 because not only does he have to come up with those back taxes,
Sure.
but now he realizes he's got to pay those taxes currently.
Sure.
So he's really now got to come up with $30,000 a month extra. The $20,000 make up the back taxes, and maybe the $10,000 to stay current on his current liability or whatever it is.
Is there any incentive on their part to let's extend his payment so he can stay in business? I mean, do they care?
The collection process from New York State is very separated
Okay.
from the billing, the assessment process.
Well, let me ask a very selfish question as a New Yorker. Are other states of the 49, are some of them more lenient in terms of payback?
Definitely.
Okay, so New York is
Definitely.
one of the more
One of the
strict-
worst.
One of the worst. Yeah, I go figure. I didn't know that. Okay, Mark, thank you so much for coming. This has been great. Any advice you want to give? How do we get in touch with you?
Well, you can reach out to me at my firm's website is salestaxdefense.com,
salestaxdefense.com, Mark Stone.
or you can give me a call.
Okay.
631-491-1500.
631-491-1500, and it's the whole country, so it's not just New York, guys. And hey, and if you like this video, please subscribe to us on YouTube. Thanks so much, and take care.
Thank you.